Hey guys, welcome to the College Alternative Podcast. Today I have the honor of being able to talk with Bob Pritchett, who is the founder, president, and CEO of Logos Bible Software Systems. It has over 3 million users, and he has over 440 employees within his company. So he really knows what he's talking about. In addition, he's kind of unique because he dropped out of both high school and out of college, and yet he is still very successful, and we're going to be talking about all that today. So the main three things we're going to be talking about are how to build up your credentials without school, right? So what can you put on your resume that's really going to impress employers? The second thing is what employers are going to be looking for when hiring somebody off the street for their first job. And then the last thing here is how do you get hired in a corporation without a degree? When you think college alternative, often you just think about trades, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, a lot of companies are going away from college degrees, and they're going to be looking more and more towards experience and what you bring to the table beyond just a piece of paper. So that's all we're going to be talking about today. I'm really looking forward to it. I hope you guys are too. So thanks again, guys, for tuning in.
Interviews with the best in their fields, teaching you how to excel in careers that don't require traditional college. You're listening to the College Alternative Podcast. Insider tips and advice, straight from the experts. And now, here is your host, James Christian.
Hello and welcome to the College Alternative Podcast. Today, I'm really excited to have Bob Pritchett on. How you doing, Bob?
I'm doing great. Thanks, James.
All right, so Bob has done a lot with his life, and I'm really excited to have him on and talk to him today. You've co-founded Logos Research Systems. You serve as president and CEO of Faith Life and Logos Bible Software. Let's see here. What else? You're a 2005 winner of the Entrepreneur of the Year Award. And then you wrote a couple of books, too. And the books that you published online got me really excited to talk with you today. Specifically, How to Quit College and Get Away with It. And I like that a lot. I showed that to a lot of my friends, and they're all like, "Ooh, yeah, so true. Ooh." And then also your recent book that you published called Start Next Now, which gives practical advice on how to advance your career, both in starting out and how you develop your career midway through. But I like to think that oftentimes it's all too easy when you think about college alternatives, just think about trades, military, entrepreneurship, when in reality, you're arguing that there are definitely ways to advance yourself within the corporate world and get hired in the corporate world without a college degree. So I guess we can get right into it. So how about you introduce yourself a little bit and kind of explain your background here and the company you run?
I was a kind of teenage entrepreneur. I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, so I know that I had that extra blessing of having entrepreneurship modeled for me. So my grandfather had kind of built himself up from humble beginnings into a succession of small businesses, a real kind of all-American success story. And my father worked for my grandfather for a while and then kind of launched his own business out of that. Always had a couple little ventures going on the side. And so I kind of grew up in that context of, my dad and my grandfather both working for themselves and sometimes with each other. And I just kind of had that expectation. So I do really appreciate that background from my parents. So I had a software company in high school that I worked on after school. I would, go to school and come home and write code and used computer bulletin boards in the days before the internet to distribute my computer software. And I got enough money to buy my first car. So I was pretty excited about doing that.
How old were you when you started your first company?
The first business of substance was really kind of freshman year of high school.
Wow.
So,
okay.
I had a few other little, selling honey and things like that.
Yeah.
Earlier. But that business had, I had customers in the Fortune 500, right, who found the stuff on the bulletin board and bought licenses to the source code. My mother would take calls during the day, and I would, do tech support after 3 when I got home from school.
Nice. So it wasn't 24/7 tech support back then.
No. And no email, actually.
So what did you do after that?
So I was in high school. I didn't really love high school. And what happened for me is I was very much a rule follower, though. So, I was going through the pattern of life that you're told to go through and following all the rules and getting okay, but not awesome grades. And I really didn't enjoy school, though, because I liked learning, but school was kind of this interruption to the learning process, right? You have to sit in a classroom and you have to follow somebody else's schedule. And I had a lot of curiosity that I wanted to, explore outside of school. And I was looking ahead during the beginning of my junior year. I started thinking about colleges, and people started talking about college. And I was reading the college catalog for one of the schools I was considering. And I noticed, in comparison to the other college catalogs, that they didn't require a high school diploma as an entry requirement.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And in fact, they had a program that they called early admission for, a certain number of high school students can be admitted after their junior year without a diploma, on application. And so I applied, and I rushed out and ended up taking the SAT early so I could include that with my results, and I got admitted. And I just skipped my senior year. I just got into college and just went. And
where did Bob go? I don't know.
Yes, I didn't show up the next year. And that was the first kind of realizing that you could step outside the normal pattern, right? I thought that you had to finish high school, that you had to have a high school diploma to go to college. Then, to kind of accelerate the story, I went to college. I went to Drexel University in Philadelphia. One of the things I liked about Drexel is they have a cooperative education program. So after your first year, you do 5 years to get a 4-year degree. But in the middle 3 years, you alternate 6 months industry, 6 months school. So it's more than like a summer internship. It's 6 whole months working in industry. They call it cooperative education. As a result, most Drexel students graduate with a job offer. And some, like me, never finish because you go out into the workforce and you realize you've found where you need to be. So I did my co-ops at Microsoft, and at the end of my first co-op, they offered me a job and said you could stay. And I thought, no, you have to finish college, and I don't have a high school diploma, and I have to get a college degree. So I went back to college, and 6 more months of college after working in industry, I realized I'd learned way more in that 6 months with Microsoft than I ever learned in school. And so on the second internship, I just converted to full-time. And during that second internship is when I also started working on kind of taking my hobby project and turning that into a business with a friend. And so it turned out to be about 8 months later, after I went full-time at Microsoft, that I quit Microsoft, my friend quit Microsoft, and we went full-time with our hobby project. And that's the business I'm running today.
Wow. Okay. So I guess the follow-up question here is, you quit both high school and quit college, and definitely a time when that wasn't fashionable. That wasn't really the thing to do. You didn't have as many resources like the internet back then. How did you develop the self-awareness at that young age to be able to do that?
Talking to other people and kind of getting some encouragement, right? Obviously, the school wasn't encouraging about either of those things.
Exactly.
But, my dad, by the time, the first time I thought, during my first internship, my dad's like, no, you got to finish college. And after the second one, we had more conversations. It's like, it's pretty clear to me you're not going to have a problem learning things. And so I realized that, I was not only learning more, but at that point too, we were kind of running out of tuition money. So my parents were helping me with college, but around that point, they're like, actually, I don't know how we're making tuition next year, and and if you take a full-time job, you're going to have an income instead of a tuition. And I felt like I was learning a lot more in that environment, which I did.
Well, I think also too, especially from the parents' perspective, college is essentially what? An insurance policy. An insurance policy to get a good job. But nowadays, that insurance policy is getting so expensive that they're stuck between a rock and a hard place oftentimes. Yeah,
and so for me, it was a little easier decision because I was doing that to join Microsoft in 1991, and that'd be like joining Google in 2001, right? It was already clearly a good place, and the insight that I remember at the time was, no one's going to ask about your college transcript after your first job. They're going to ask about that at your first job because that's all they've got on your resume. If you worked in Microsoft in 1991, if you had another job interview, I actually haven't had one since then, but if I did, all the questions would be about that job, not about how you did in college. And if you think of college as a way to get a job, if you can land that first job without it, you can build your resume off of that. Now, I think there is more to college than getting a job. There's being a well-rounded person and getting a broad education, and I even see the value of a liberal arts education that's non-technical. But as we'll get into, there's a lot of tools for that now that didn't exist or weren't as easy to access in the past.
Yeah. All right. So, kind of getting into some of your books and publications that you've written here. So, what is your book Start Next Now about?
So Start Next Now is really about starting whatever your next thing is, right? Over the years, I've had lots of people, interns, my kids, other people who are starting businesses come and say, I want to have coffee with you and I want to talk about my idea, right? And it's been all over the place, right? A guy who wants to start a software company, one of my employees who wants to get into a jewelry making business, right? Just all these different things. And everybody's got this idea and they have this dream and they can all see 10 years from now, I'm not going to be here, I'm going to be doing this other thing. But I noticed this pattern where for many people, and particularly the ones who were kind of always asking for help, there was no map between here and 10 years from now, right? Yeah. 10 years from now, I'm going to own a jewelry store and be making my own jewelry and teaching jewelry classes, right? Like, well, okay, so how do you get there? Well, I don't know, but it's 10 years away. It's like, yeah, but something has to change between where you're sitting today and where you want to be, and let's unpack that. So Start Next Now is really a book that's kind of the distilled advice of those coffee meetings, right? It is literally what to do tomorrow, what to do tonight to start whatever your next is. And your next could be running for Congress, your next could be opening a jewelry store, it could be launching a business, it could just be getting promoted, right? But there's something you can do right now to pursue that next. Just like you've done with, start the podcast and get going.
Yeah, why not? Why not?
And so I think that a lot of people, just like I needed permission essentially from that course catalog to apply to college early, like I felt like there were these rules and you had to follow the rules and stay in high school for 4 years and get a high school diploma and then apply to college and right. Then somebody showed me that you could go to college without a high school diploma. And so I did. And then somebody told me that you could get a job at Microsoft without a college diploma, right? And so I did. And I want to kind of be that permission for other people to say, you want to start a jewelry business or whatever, that's great. It's not mysterious. And you can start right now, and you don't have to wait for the jewelry fairy to come down and tap you on the shoulder and tell you what to do.
And I think that's great too, because you're kind of pulling back the curtain as far as you don't have to take everybody's path, somebody else's path, because you're going to be second place to that person. You're always going to be following that person. You're never going to be first, et cetera, et cetera. And I really, actually, it's not that long of a read, so I would encourage everybody to really check it out because you said distilled, and it is. And you're going through, hey, if you're not at this point in life, what can be your next path? What's your next option here? There's definitely an impetus there to develop and keep yourself going because too often, you can stagnate, right?
Right.
Just be comfortable in life. Yeah. And so the next thing here is what inspired you to write How You Can Quit College and Get Away with It?
So that's a slide presentation that's up on SlideShare. And that was really kind of in response to some conversations with our interns, right? So I was out at lunch with a number of our summer interns, and we were talking about college, and they were kind of fascinated with the idea that, that I was the CEO of the company they're working for, but I hadn't graduated college. And some of them were talking about, not only graduating, but whether or not they were going to do a master's degree, before they would come work for us or whatever. And I kind of went home and said, I'm going to make the case for how you don't have to take that path. And it's not the right thing for everybody, but even if you are in college, engaging that question of why and is this a good investment is an important educational process.
Mm-hmm. And I think all too often now we're seeing more and more people graduate with an undergrad degree, find that they can't find that particular job that they want to do. The company might not hire them with just an undergrad. Now they're going to have to go back and get that master's and get that. Where does it stop as far as the education side of the house?
Right, and that's because it's easier for, particularly for large employers, to evaluate people in bulk based on credentials, right? So, one of the things in my presentation, I compare a college degree to a limited warranty on a refrigerator, right? I mean,
Yeah.
a limited warranty on a refrigerator basically says, it came out of our factory, we used good processes, somebody inspected it for quality, we plugged it in before it left and it works, and if it doesn't, we'll give you a refund. Right, and a college is essentially doing that kind of limited warranty on you. I can't really judge everything about this person's competence or tell you everything about them, but I can say that they sat through a class on all these subjects and they were able to regurgitate the basic answers that we expected people to know, and they showed up on time week after week for all the weeks of the semester, and so they're going to be, here's a limited warranty that they'll be a decent employee compared to this other person completely nothing about.
Yeah, but as you said before, a lot of these kids are coming out of college and they haven't really learned anything about the business. And like you said before, I learned so much more when I was working at Microsoft during that internship than I ever did in school.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's really a choice for the individual people, right? I mean, the companies are looking for a shortcut in terms of credentials and everything else. And, you may have learned something in college, right? You learn to show up on time, you learn to take tests, you learn to pay attention, right? But those are some pretty basic skills. You should have learned a lot of that in kindergarten, too.
Yeah.
But in terms of when you're looking at what companies are hiring, if you're going to a company where everything is credential based, it's probably actually not going to be that exciting a place, right? I mean, my joke about that is, any company that says, I need to hire 300 people with master's degrees, when they lose a big order in the other way, somebody picks up the phone and says, fire 300 of the engineers with master's degrees, right? They never know your name, right? You're just 300 people with a master's degree, right? I don't want to work in a place where, where the credential is a substitute for my reputation.
Mm-hmm. Or as probably more important for the employer is the soft skills, the stuff that you really can't actually evaluate easily, like a degree, which is, drive and inspiration and motivation. I mean, how do you even evaluate that as an employer amongst your potential hirees?
Right, and that's actually really hard to get out of interviewing. We're trying to get better at interviewing, but that's one of the things that you kind of have to look for in personality. Even skills nowadays, because there's so many different schools, there's so many different levels of education. It's possible to get certified in a lot of things without being good at it. I mean, you'd be amazed the number of people I've met who have a degree in English who can't, edit an article to where it would be suitable to go in our magazine, right? So we've ended up developing our own skills tests. So, we hire software developers. We don't really care if you have a computer science degree. There's some guys with math and physics degrees that are really excellent software developers. We've had people come out of things like music composition and turn out to be pretty good software developers.
Yeah, why not? I mean, artistic, right?
But I can run a test that determines if you're a good software developer. I can look at code you wrote. I can check out your GitHub profile and whatever else. In the same way, now if we interview somebody to be a copy editor or to do writing for us, we have an editing test. It's a 12-page test of English grammar. It's a lot like what you went through in 5th grade. It has some fill-in-the-blank multiple choice questions on English grammar, and then it ends with a poorly written article that was submitted to us that we give you 20 minutes in a room with a red pencil and see if you can edit it. And, it turns out that 20 minutes in a room with a red pencil and a bad article is a better test of your editing skills than whether or not you have an English degree.
So this sounds crazy to me. So not only did this person have to, not only are you having to, what am I trying to say here? You essentially are creating your own accreditation or credentialing system outside of the college system.
Right, and at some level, I mean, almost every employer is doing that except the ones that are hiring people in huge bulk, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, the internet and technology are making that easier and easier to do. You can administer tests remotely. You can, like I said, software developers, I used to ask a lot of questions. 20 years ago, we'd ask a ton of questions about your computer science education because there was no way to judge your code. Nowadays, everybody can put their code up on the internet. You can, code live together over a web browser. You probably wrote something that's in the App Store that I can download and play with. It's a lot easier to evaluate.
Yeah, see my portfolio here. Oh, this is really cool. Well, I don't have a degree. Oh, I don't care.
Exactly.
Some
Portfolios
stuff.
That's a great way of putting it, right? In almost every job now, there's a way to kind of be building a portfolio on the internet, right? I mean, for that matter, if you want to get a job as a chef, right? If you start blogging all the stuff you do in your kitchen, that's going to give me a pretty good picture of of you apart from whatever your education is.
Yeah. Those pictures and that video that you post is going to be so much more in depth than that resume that you're looking at and those bullet points. Yeah.
And jumping ahead, I think in your topics, but it's like if I was looking for alternate credentials to having a degree, I would be looking at whatever the portfolio was. And different fields have different portfolios, right? The graphic designers have a whole world of of online shared portfolios, and the software developers have others. And in every field, there's places on the web where those people hang out, and that's one place to kind of build a non-academic set of credentials.
And that's something that you can easily just call up and say, hey, what are you looking for here? How can I tailor myself for you?
Right.
Yeah. That's just a simple phone call. That's great. So another question here is, businesses seem to be requiring higher and higher levels of education, right? Because it seems like the market is saturated and degrees aren't worth as much as they used to be. Is this because degrees are becoming more overvalued or undervalued?
I think it's because we're turning college into 4 more years of high school, right? For good or for bad. So we've decided that if college is good and raises the income of people who go, then if we sent everybody to college, it would raise the income for everybody and we'd all be richer. And there's maybe a nugget of truth of that in terms of more education can make society wealthier, but really there's also some kind of correlation causation confusion going on there, right? When we only sent the top 10% of our academically gifted society to college, college was a pretty good distinguisher of lifetime earnings potential and intellectual capacity. When we start sending the top 40% of the population to college, well, it's going to reflect the top 40% of society. And so in that world, I think employers, when my grandfather went to college in the 30s or something, he's getting a college degree then meant something very different than getting a college degree today, right? So now you got places that used to require a bachelor's degree that are requiring a master's degree because it just gives them an extra level of filter, and because they can, because there weren't that many people with a master's degree in the 30s comparatively to what we have now.
Oh yeah,
and,
very rare.
So you're just another level of filter that they can. And all things considered, who doesn't want the best employees? Who doesn't want the most educated people? So you're going to get to that point where it'll just keep escalating, and eventually you're going to need a PhD to get that entry level job.
Well, you can invent the next degree beyond a PhD and then just become very wealthy, like that 5th level and trademark it and everything, and it'll be great. That's your next business. For your personal company here, do you have a hiring preference when it comes to college degrees, or are you not really looking at that? Are you looking more at the performance side of the house?
We're really interested in smart and gets things done. Yeah. So I can't guarantee that I've stopped it in every job description we've written, but generally we don't have a degree requirement, or if we do, it's phrased something like bachelor's degree in computer science or equivalent experience, right? And that's really just kind of code for what skill set we're looking for. But I don't care if your equivalent experience comes from being a music composition major who taught themselves how to code. We're just looking for those skills. We have long since stopped caring about what your actual degree is in if it doesn't have some direct relevance to what you're doing. We got a few very narrow things. I mean, we're a company that actually provides academic solutions in a narrow discipline of biblical studies, right? So I actually have a few jobs where a PhD in Hebrew is particularly useful because part of your job will be talking to other people with PhDs in Hebrew. That's a very narrow specific function.
Yeah, well, and then also in that SlideShare presentation that you have, you did also say something along the lines of college degree or equivalent experience.
Right. And there's going to be different, if you want to be a doctor, right, you're probably not going to get to play this game, right? They're going to want you to have, have the degree, right? There's occupational licensing issues and all these other things. We have built a society that has a lot of credentialism in it. But I'm most concerned with where we can get around a sidestep or, cut through that system.
Nice. Okay, so kind of talking about that a little bit, and we already addressed a little bit about profiles. Mm-hmm. How can a person stand out as a potential hiree? What are some other ways of building credentials without attending college?
So, well, I do kind of regret how we're becoming a very credentialism society, right? Where we're valuing the credential more than the actual knowledge and competency. Credentials are a really useful thing, right? They're a shortcut, right? If I need to hire a bunch of engineers, if you have a master's degree in electrical engineering, it's a shortcut of telling me you know a lot about that subject and probably know all the basic things that I would expect. And there could be somebody without it who knows more, but it's going to take longer to interview them and screen them and everything else. So if you're not going to get a degree in a field that's going to act as a code or as a shorthand for identifying your skill, you should have alternate credentials, right? So I don't have an MBA. So how do you know that I know anything about business, right? Well, I got a business card that says CEO, right? So that's a little bit of a clue. Yeah. And you can go to LinkedIn and you can look up that I have, around 300 employees. So that tells you that it's probably not CEO of my kitchen, right? Or something. So that's one kind of credential I have. And then, you mentioned earlier that I won an Entrepreneur of the Year award, right? So that's a form of credential, right? And as silly as it sounds, I sought that credential out when I needed it. So I was writing a book on entrepreneurship, and the publisher was like, "What? Remember, you got to give us all your awards and certifications and titles that we can stick on the back of the book." And I realized I've got nothing, right? I'm a high school dropout. I'm a college dropout. I don't have any credentials to write a book on entrepreneurship.
Yeah, why do people listen? Why should people listen?
I'm an entrepreneur, and I feel like I have something to say here, but I don't have any credentials. So I went looking for entrepreneurship competitions, and I got nominated for the Ernst and Young one, and I'm really happy that I won it that year. But that was the first time I went out, is I realized I needed a credential that says he knows something about entrepreneurship, right? So I went and applied and fortunately won that thing. But that award is actually, it serves as a kind of credential, right? Winning that, there's only a limited number of people in each region who win that award each year. It's a great credential. And I stuck that on the back of the book. And then the book became a credential, right? So since I wrote that book on entrepreneurship, I've had dozens of speaking engagements on entrepreneurship. I've spoken in various states around the country. I've spoken at a regional conference in Costa Rica because now I'm an author who wrote a book on entrepreneurship and has an award for being an Entrepreneur of the Year, right? And those credentials I intentionally sought out to kind of supplement the missing, MBA in entrepreneurship. And all things considered, I'd rather, learn about entrepreneurship from an entrepreneur than from an MBA in entrepreneurship. But it gives you something to work with. And I think you can do that in every field. So if you don't have, if you don't have the educational credential that says I'm an expert in this, can you write a blog in that subject? Can you write a book? Can you win an award in the category? Can you, have a column, an op-ed on the subject published in a major publication and use the clipping as an introduction? Ironically, I've spoken to more people about entrepreneurship than ever read my book on entrepreneurship, right? I think of the book, it's a credential, right? I don't really care if you read it. You just need to see my name was on the cover, right? Yeah. I'd like you to read it. That'd be great. But but in a sense, that's what it is it's another form of credential. And I look at how people are using everything from a YouTube channel to a podcast like you're doing, to writing a book, to hanging out in an industry forum and becoming an expert at answering questions and being involved in the conversation. I've seen that over and over and over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think society has changed because access to those forums and the chat rooms and establishing yourself online as an expert has been easier than ever before.
Right. We go looking for graphic designers on graphic design portfolio sites, and we look for people who've got lots of other people liking the work they put on their site. Right? Yeah. And we go looking for software developers on Stack Overflow and GitHub and look for people whose projects have been liked or forked or whose questions have been upvoted. And, there's so many more tools out there now for establishing your credibility and competence.
Mm-hmm. If I have 1 million likes because of my graphic design, like you say, versus somebody who just has a degree or a limited work experience or hasn't really developed themselves publicly, I'm going to probably choose that person that has 1 million likes.
Absolutely.
He's got great artwork. He's connecting.
You want a job as my social media coordinator, I want to see how many likes you have or on whatever account you've been managing. I don't really care if you have a degree in social media. I feel a little suspicious of that.
So, do you see a difference in the caliber of employees that go to college and versus those that don't at all?
So, in general, the employees who've gone to college are strong, right? Because we still have a social thing where the best and the brightest get encouraged by their parents, their pastors, their priests to go to college. Right? So, and most people can't resist that pressure and follow that process. So yes, lots of the people who work for me have a college degree. I've got people with masters and PhDs, and they are generally smart, competent people. But some of my more interesting, more creative, more effective people are the ones who took that alternate path, right? But I don't have as many of them who went another way. And then of course there's some people who didn't go to college and also are just, they're in an entry-level job and not doing anything particularly extra exciting there, because that's part of the normal pattern too. I just don't. So I'm not saying that, I do better with people who didn't go to college, although I would say that in a higher level creative job, the people who've been very successful who didn't go to college, often they're very successful because they kind of think outside the box and, are willing to do things a little differently.
Yeah, break the norm a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. So you as an employer, how do you encourage employees to continue their own education within your company?
Reading, to the point that we pay people to read business books and to read things out of their discipline. You've heard the story about Abraham Lincoln walking 5 miles to borrow one book, right, when he was a kid.
Yeah.
We are all carrying a device which has essentially every book published in the history of the world, with few exceptions, available at our fingertips, right? Abraham Lincoln had to walk 5 miles for one book, and I have all the books in the universe in my pocket.
Yeah.
Right. So when people say, well, I want to continue my education, I'm like, what's stopping you? What did you do at lunch? Were you reading a book? Right? I'm continuing my education every day. When I drove to work this morning, I was listening to the great courses on an audio podcast, right? So when people come to me and say, well, I want to continue my education, is the company going to give a tuition subsidy for me to go back and get my master's degree? I generally say no to that, unless there's some specific reason we need them to have that credential. I'm like, and my first question would be, tell me about which classes you're going to take in that master's program and the last book you read on that subject, right? And the person says, well, I haven't read any books on that subject, so I got to go take the class. They're not really interested in continuing their education. They're interested in adding credentials to their resume or diplomas to their wall, right? But if you really wanted to learn about that subject, you would not be waiting until you showed up in a classroom to read on it, right? And if you started reading on it, I don't know how you wouldn't arrive at the question of what exactly is the value of paying $15,000 to go take that in a classroom, or 20 or 30 or 50,000.
Well, see, that's the thing that I was trying to sort of get at is, do you guys offer a tuition assistance program, and is that probably the most value bang for your buck, essentially, as an employer, versus
I'll buy you a book.
Yeah, versus going on to YouTube and looking up some lectures from Stanford where they bring in high-level entrepreneurs to deliver talks, for an hour at a time, or reading those books on the latest marketing or entrepreneurial techniques out there, and you're getting the best and the greatest versus, I don't know, at your local community college possibly that you can go to.
Yeah, 20 years ago I had somebody whose job required a whole lot of Excel, and they weren't great at Excel. And I paid for that person to go to the community college and take a course in Excel because, the local bookstore only had, 2 Excel books or something.
Yeah.
I would never pay to send someone to the community college to learn Excel again, because you could sit and spend the entire rest of your life watching Excel training videos on the internet, and good ones.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, really good ones.
And every question you need answered about Excel is answered on the web. Right, and if you need the book, you don't have to look at what your town's bookstore has. You can go on Amazon, and every book that was ever written on it is available to you for $20. Right, so I just extend that to kind of everything in there. You want to learn more about marketing? That's great. We have a library full of marketing books, and I'd be happy to walk through it with you and say, read this first, read this first, read this first. And if you don't like my recommendations, go on the internet, and there's 10 guys with the 10 most essential marketing textbooks everyone should read.
And then try and institute those practices that they recommend. And if it doesn't work for you, then it doesn't, then don't do it again.
Some people do need the structure of classes, and there is something about the accountability of that, and I totally get that.
Okay,
but you got to weigh that against what you're paying, right? So at various times, we'll even have a class in-house, right? People say, well, I want to learn more about software development, but I need a little structure and discipline. Great. So we had a guy here who knows the Python programming language volunteer to run a Python class, every Thursday at lunchtime for 10 weeks. Right. Well, that gives you some accountability and a group of people and an instructor to ask questions of. But, we didn't have to pay tuition for that.
Nice. Yeah, that's true. And you're able to target specifically to
Mhm.
your company. So, okay. So I guess getting to some like the macro questions, some of the bigger questions here. What does success look like for you? And has that changed over time?
I think success is doing work you like, that where you feel like you're contributing value to the world. Success to me is not about a particular monetary bar or lifestyle thing. And I want to say it's just about happiness, but I feel like it comes from doing something important, right? And there's important work we need all through society, right? I really appreciate a guy who is a great plumber. I have worked with a really bad plumber, and he made my life miserable and my house broken, right? And I've worked with a guy who was a great plumber, and I love that guy because it works and it doesn't leak. And, that's a contribution to society, right? And so success, if you enjoy that, and the guy who my favorite plumber at the moment is a guy who seems super excited about it. He likes fixing your problem. When he came late at night before a holiday and fixed our, broken sink, he felt like, he had rescued Mother's Day for our family, and he did, right? That's a contribution, and that's success, right? Success for other people can be about, I want to make more money, or I want to live at this particular level. But it's, there's a lot of research that says it tops out, right? That whether it's $70,000 or $80,000, somewhere around that level, once you get beyond it's very stressful to not have enough money to deal with a medical crisis or a car problem or whatever.
Yeah.
It is. Once you get to the point where you could fix a $500 problem in your car, and you've got health insurance and everything else, the money stops adding to your happiness, right? What adds to your happiness is working with people you like, doing work you feel is important, getting to use the skills you have, continuing to learn and grow. So that's what I encourage, my own kids and the people I work with to say, sure, we can sit and map out how you could make a ton more money, right? You want to make $1 million a year. I don't make $1 million a year, but we can talk about how you could do it, right? Because it can be done. There's people who do it. Mm-hmm. And there's a path to it. But is that really what you want? Or what you want is something that you enjoy doing and find fulfilling? And I'd rather talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. So how has your parents, or how has you as a parent set your own kids up for success then?
So what I think I really appreciate what my parents did, which was to basically kind of not only believe that I could do whatever I wanted to, and not in a super like cheerleading way, but almost a matter of fact way. My parents are not super effervescent cheerleaders. They're more like, you'd say, I would really like to be an astronaut, and they wouldn't dismiss it, which is great. A lot of parents would go, oh, you'll never be an astronaut, right? My parents were like, that's great. Well, then, you better study some more science, and most of the astronauts come through the Air Force, so you better figure out how you get into the Air Force Academy. And right, I mean, they would tell you how to be an astronaut, right? And that kind of just matter of fact encouragement, like you can do whatever you want, but there's things you'll have to do it, was great. So when I said, I want to start a business, they didn't laugh at me. They're like, yeah, what's your business going to do, right? And, hey, you should try this. And, so like I said, the first thing, I did that was a real business was selling honey, right? Well, it's like I got a beehive, and my parents took me to meet a beekeeper, and we got a catalog of supplies, and we went to the library and bought all the books on keeping bees. And, my mother helped me, get together a costume so I wouldn't get stung, and went into business, right? And that kind of just gentle encouragement was very helpful to me. And with my kids, I don't know what they're going to do, right? They're still in college, although I'm not sure. One of them may not finish. I'm not sure yet. He's working right now. Mm-hmm. But the encouragement I give them is, whatever you want to do, we can help you figure out how to do that. And I can afford to send them to college, and they don't have a better alternative. I'm happy to do that. But when my son said, and take time off and work, well, that's okay too. But, let's use that time productively.
Mm-hmm. So your parents and you support your children and whatever they do, but you're not just giving them false hope. You're actually providing pathways and encouragement and guidance to achieve their goal.
Right. I want to help them have the opportunities to pursue those things. And on the flip side, I'm able to send my kids to college where they're not incurring debt. They're going to a state school. They're not going to the most expensive school, and they're going to graduate debt free. And I think that's a great gift to be able to give them, is to not, start life at 23 years old with $50,000 in, student loan debt or something like that.
Oh yeah, that you can't bankrupt yourself out of, and you're going to be stuck with that for a long, long, long time. And it's kind of short-sighted just to keep on incurring that debt, saying, hey, I'm going to pay this off. Well, are you? Are you really going to? What's your pathway in life to be able to do that? I guess the next question here is, what do you wish schools would teach their students? I guess kind of citing in secondary education, not necessarily college.
That's a great question. And on different days, I have different answers, right? Some days I wish they would teach them more math.
Well, yeah.
Some more economics. I think we underteach statistics. But I think that at some level we underteach the skills it takes to kind of make things happen, right? And this, I don't know whether we did, or I'm not old enough to know if we did a better job of it in the past, right? But I think that we become very focused on scores and achievement, and right, is everyone passing the math test? Is everyone passing our basic English skills test or whatever? That we're getting away from kind of the life skills and the kind of the how to do it skills. So you see people have a lot of technical knowledge, but not necessarily a lot of integrating that into life. I'd like to see a little better angle on that. It's hard to judge, right? And the schools are so diverse. There's some that are doing a good job of that, some that are not doing a bad job of it. But I do think that we're still, well, I guess, and this is my other big theme, we're still running a very old school model, right? We're running, the German school model of the 19th century that, adapted to America, but we're still kind of running that thing. I'm going to teach you a bunch of facts. You're going to learn how to do a bunch of these things. We're going to drill you on all these things. There's almost nobody's ever going to come out of the schools without a device in their pocket that will do all the math they ever need, look up all the answers they ever need, whatever. And, I love the book by David Weinberger, Too Big to Know, which gets to the question of what does it mean to know something, right? And the idea that what it means to know something or to be educated can actually change over time, right? 200 years ago, if you couldn't put your hand in the ground and feel the quality of the soil, you were an idiot, right? If you couldn't, look at a horse and judge its health, you weren't very useful in some parts of society, right? And today, I don't need to be able to judge the soil with my fingertips or to, grade the health of a horse, right? I could, and if I needed to, I could look those things up or consult an expert to get more data. In the same way, as silly as it sounds, I need to know how long division works, maybe, just to understand it. Do I really need to be an expert at doing it when I'm going to have a calculator in my pocket for all of time to come, right?
Yeah.
And you say, well, everybody wants their kids to know what they had to know, right? Because we think that our kids need to know what we needed. But it's not really true. They need to know the skills for the next generation, which we have no idea what they are. And maybe we should be using that time to teach, how computers work to a broader cross-section of society, right? Maybe getting time to bring something higher level like statistics further down into the educational thing would make sense if you didn't have to spend as much time drilling on the mechanics of the math.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned statistics, but I also include, its cousin, financial literacy. We never teach financial literacy at all.
Right, and to me, that is all tied together with a real world thing, right? The inability to, it's not that I want everybody to be able to do the math of statistics, but even understanding really how it works is part of financial literacy, about making good business decisions, right? We hire people all the time who can execute a lot of math, but don't really understand, how to evaluate two options in the business. Right? Or why this is a good idea and why it's a bad idea. And that really has more to do with, you're right, financial literacy, economics, statistics, being able to integrate those things instead of just having strong technical skills with the mechanics.
And I think here's the other kind of point that I wanted to make here is the reason some people say to go to college is, like you said, to provide that structure, because they're not good at being self-taught. But at the same time, it seems like our public school systems creates a person that's really dependent upon teachers for providing information, right? So it's not just you're going there because you can't be self-taught, but you're also going there to try to learn how to learn, right? But it's not setting you up to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of teachers say that they're teaching you how to learn how to learn.
Yeah.
Some do it better than others, and some school formats do it better, right? There's a lot of experimentation going on in education, which I think is exciting. There's things like the Acton Academy, which is trying to use a kind of replacing the teacher with a guide, and actually, taking K to 12 students and kind of using more of a Socratic method of exploration and inquiry to educate K to 12 students, right? Which is something that previously might have only been in the university environment. I think it's exciting that people are doing those kind of experiments, and they really are teaching the kids to learn how to learn. But that's something that ultimately, I think, if you're counting on the school to do that, that's a mistake. You need to take responsibility for your own education.
Mm-hmm. And that's your individual responsibility, and that's your parents' responsibility to say, hey, wake up, this is your responsibility.
The great thing is we live in an unbelievable era, right? I mean, the access to information and knowledge and education we have now, right? In the day when Abraham Lincoln had to walk 5 miles to borrow a book, information couldn't move faster than a horse, and shortly later, faster than a train, right? You literally couldn't even move knowledge faster than you could move a horse. Knowledge had to be recorded and moved physically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lincoln didn't have radio, right? You couldn't. It's almost inconceivable now. You couldn't move information faster than a horse, and now we can have all the information from all the world in video, audio, text from anywhere on the planet instantaneously, and we don't even have to go sit at our computers. We can do it with the device that's in our pocket, right? So that's just. I mean, if you are somebody who wants to take responsibility for your own education, there's never been a time in history as rich as right now.
So one final question here, and that's really jumping on the back of what you just said here, is you want to take your own responsibility for your own education. What are some of the best ways, some of the most efficient ways to be able to learn the skills needed for the workforce?
Reading the internet, right, is one of the first things. There's an amazing amount of stuff you can learn on YouTube or reading online. I'm actually a big fan of audio courses, right? The companies like the Great Courses have a wide variety of courses that you can listen to over your phone. You can buy them on Audible or iTunes for dollars compared to what it would cost to take those classes in schools. There's just a limitless amount of resources now.
Nice. All right. Well, Bob, it was great having you on. Thank you very much for just coming on, talking. And it's very, very interesting, your perspective as an employer, not just talking as an employee, but talking as an employer. Hey, there's some better options out there, or some different options to get hired and advance yourself in the workforce. And I think that's really great to see what your perspective is on this topic. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks. I really appreciate you having me.
And so for all the people that are listening out there, definitely check out his books. Start Next Now is the latest book that I've read from him. It won't take you too long to get through, but I think it's very, very valuable, the information they put out there. Check that out. Check out his Bob's slides, How to Quit College and Get Away with It. And also, was this your first book, The Fire Someone Today and Other Surprising Tactics? Okay. Definitely check that one out too. Fire Someone Today and Other Surprising Tactics for Making Your Business a Success. It'll help him out and help him with his credentials and everything like that too. So, but Bob, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. All right. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
So thanks for tuning in, guys. I really hope you enjoyed the conversation today with Bob Pritchett. I really honestly think that he is not the only CEO, not the only company out there that is going this route of, I really don't care about the college degree. I care what you bring to the table in terms of experience. What can you do for me and for my company, etc. So if you like the conversation today, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Make sure to get updates when we're pushing out weekly podcasts. And if you have any comments, questions, etc., please leave them down below in the comment section for us. All right, so until next time, bye guys.